I'm going to take advantage of the sudden lowering of the decibel level to get things underway. I am Robert Zatorre, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you all here to the Montreal Neurological Institute for this workshop. And I just wanted to tell you just a little bit of the thinking behind it and how it sort of emerged. So the whole genesis of this event started with a conversation that I wasn't actually privy to between Alan Evans and Mr. Irving Ludmer, who is a major contributor and, of course, has helped to found the Ludmer Center here at the MNI. And the way that Alan told me about this was, well, there's a lot of excellent work going on in neuroscience, but Mr. Ludmer is particularly interested in consciousness. So why don't you get together with some of your friends and solve the problem of consciousness? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, we're already doing that, thanks to a CFAR program, which I'll tell you about in a second. But more seriously, I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity because we already do have a research group working on consciousness involving Adrian Owen from Western and quite a large number of other people, Mel Goodale as well as one of the organizers of that group. And so I called Adrian up and I said, this might be an opportunity to get some interesting people together, and let's think about how we might join forces to push forward a few concepts and ideas about how to deal with this issue. And this also had a nice confluence with a joint project between our two universities, McGill and Western, thanks to a CFREF project that we each have. And ours is called the Healthy Brains for Healthy Lives. Theirs is called BrainScan. And we're already working together a great deal on many aspects of neuroscience, particularly in relation to applications that might lead to healthier brains and healthier lives, as the title suggests, but also quite a lot of basic science. So we already had a kind of interaction going on these two different levels, one from the CFAR group, one from the CFREF activity. And so it seemed a natural. And so we started putting people together. And then we realized that the timing was really optimal because during the month of March, we have the visit of Pedro Valdez Sosa from the Cuban Neuroscience Center, who is here with us today. And so we thought, okay, this is really a fantastic combination of possibilities because we have Pedro's expertise in EEG and other domains. And then we have Adrian's research, particularly on minimally conscious states and other related conditions. And in our lab, we don't really work in those domains, but we do have some research going on in the idea of decoding of different kinds of mental events or cognitive representations. So we started putting it all together, and it kind of grew, and now I hope it's not out of control, but it's grown way beyond what we expected. We never thought there would be such a gigantic group of people here, but of course I'm delighted to see that there's so much interest. And I guess scientifically, the way we were thinking about it was that this might be a really good time to get this particular group of people together, because on the one hand, there's been a lot of interest over the last decade or so in the idea of using decoding algorithms to really look at brain imaging data and try to infer different kinds of mental states or different kinds of mental representations. Most of that has been done with fMRI, but there's also interest in other domains as well. And at the same time, there's the work that Adrian has pioneered, but other people have also worked on, which is to really try to apply some of these techniques to different kinds of clinical populations, particularly people who may be in states that don't allow them to communicate with the outside world very well. So we thought if we put these kind of ideas together, along with the EEG expertise that Pedro and other speakers bring to the table, we might have an interesting opportunity to really move things forward. So what I would like to say is that I have a few sort of goals in mind for this workshop. I really want it to be a workshop, not just a series of talks. There will be a series of really excellent talks, of course, but I really want there to be a lot of discussion, and I want it to be really workshop in the sense of that the results that are being presented maybe are not final results, maybe they are works in progress, and we want to think about that sort of collectively. So what I would like to see as sort of concrete outcomes would be that perhaps we can generate some ideas for possible projects that some combination of people who haven't previously worked together might now conceive of. We could also take advantage of the fact that both at McGill and at Western, we have our own each separate research funds for these two programs, but there's also the joint McGill-Western program, which is open right now, and that's for PIs from the two universities to get together. So if there are ideas that are generated from this workshop that can go in that direction, that would be fantastic. The other idea I had was that because we have a lot of people in the room with expertise in sort of algorithmic development, that maybe when people who work either in basic science or in clinical science see some of those algorithms, they might say, oh, look, I didn't know about that. Maybe that can be applied to one of my research questions or to one of my clinical questions, or vice versa, that maybe some of the people who work on algorithms might hear one of the basic science researchers or one of the clinicians and say, oh, I have an algorithm that maybe I could offer to them or I could tweak to be able to address one of the problems that they have. So that would be another goal that I don't know if it will come to fruition, but it's certainly something that I would try to encourage. There are a number of people who are presenting who will talk about different kinds of clinical populations. So there's not only Adrian's work on minimally conscious states, but also people who will discuss anesthesia applications and other populations with communication disorders. And so that's a very interesting type of application that might also be another outcome of this meeting, is if we can generate some ideas that could really move that area forward. So those are sort of the main things that I want to say. I specifically want to be sure that I thank the Latimer Foundation, because they have made this possible by an initial very generous donation. And also subsequently, we received additional support both from McGill's Healthy Brains, Healthy Lives initiative and from Western's Brain Scan initiative. And so they are really footing the bill here. So we certainly want to acknowledge that. I also want to make sure to acknowledge the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, whose VP for research is here, and he'll say a few words. But CFAR is really central to this, because the whole reason that Adrian and I are working or thinking about consciousness at all is because we have this very large international team of people. And so if it weren't for that, I don't think, if Alan had come to me and we hadn't already been in that team, I would have just told him, Alan, forget it. I don't know anything about consciousness, and we're not going to try to go there. But it's thanks to the initiative that's already happened that we're able to organize this thing. So I would like to invite John Hepburn, who's the VP Research for CFAR, to just say a couple of words about the organization and the program, Brain, Mind, and Consciousness program, following which Alan will give a little bit of an introduction as well. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Robert. For those of you who don't know, and there's several people in the audience who are connected with the CFAR Brain, Mind, and Consciousness program, CFAR is about a 3-dozen-year-old organization that was started by a man called Fraser Mustard, sort of a visionary researcher and a polymath. And he basically hypothesized that if you want to address really, really difficult questions and important questions, you have to bring together groups of people from many, many different disciplines for a prolonged period of time. And so brain, mind, and consciousness is a perfect example of that sort of thing. You know, where does consciousness come from? What is consciousness? So a very big question that's been addressed by philosophers, biologists, neuroscientists, and that's exactly the group of sort of 24 researchers from around the world that have been brought together. The expectation is it's going to take them a long time to answer this question, maybe the rest of their careers. You know, Adrian's counting on that actually. But really, we're only interested in questions that are going to take a long, long time to answer. But we're willing to support them for a long, long time because they're important questions. Strangely enough, CFAR has quite an obsession with brain science and has had for a long time. Another Montrealer on the other side of the mountain, Yoshua Bengio, is co-director of a program, Learning in Machines and Brains, so a machine learning program, which of course now is the hottest thing on earth. But when we started the program 15 years ago, it was just a crazy idea that only a few computer scientists dared to believe in. And now there's a convergence because, of course, if machines can learn, can they become conscious? And so now there's we're having a brain symposium next week, and I know there's going to be a lot of discussions between the machine learning folks and the brain, mind, and consciousness folks, amongst others. But we support programs across the spectrum of disciplines, so we worry about social inequality from a sort of a psychological point of view, all the way through to colliding neutron stars, which I was hearing about at great length at a meeting in Banff just a few weeks ago because of the excitement over the gravity wave and optical detection of colliding neutron stars. So we're interested in a lot of things. We run 12 different programs. I invite you to go to cfar.ca to see what we do. But brain, mind, and consciousness is a perfect example of the sort of thing that we're really interested in. And we hope they do come up with an answer within a decade or so. So thanks very much. And I'm looking forward to this symposium. It's going to be very interesting.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Alan Evans. I have been given the dubious honor of being identified as a co-organizer of this meeting. I don't deserve it. This meeting was organized by Robert and Adrian and associated support colleagues who did an awful lot of work. I essentially, as Robert, it's important that you have a previous alignment of your talks and your plans with the other speakers, because Robert said all the things that I thought I was going to say about the origins of this. But it does seem to me that this has been a remarkable confluence of threads and ideas that have come together. Mr. Ludmer is very interested in consciousness, and he approached me and said, you have to do more in this area. And while I'm, like many people in the room, a consciousness groupie, I'm fascinated by the entire concept of consciousness. I have no credentials as a conscious researcher, and I'm delighted that people of the standing of people like Adrian are here to carry that side of the story. But what I did think was an opportunity here was to develop a platform environment which would allow us to study not only consciousness, but other forms, aspects of mental brain state, both state and trait. And I felt that the most productive way to achieve that was through electrophysiology, EEG. And so that gave rise to the conversations with Robert and then with Adrian. And we were very fortunate that Pedro Valdez Sosa, one of the giants in the field of EEG and analytics, was in town with us for a month to work on some of the platform initiatives that we have in place, and I will be talking about that in a moment. So all of these things coming together give us a remarkable opportunity. The fact that this room is packed to the gills, I think, is testament to the broad interest there is in this area, and I think we do have the potential to explore the spatiotemporal dynamics of different brain states in a way that's really not possible with any other non-invasive technique. So with that said, I'll just show you a few slides. I'll try and be quick because half the audience has seen these slides many times, and I apologize for that. So by way of context, this is the world we inhabit today. Data from all the way from subcellular to whole brain and everything in between. And please note EEG, MEG is an important component of this multi-omic neuroscience framework that we now inhabit. We're also in a world where large amounts of data is made available in the public domain. And increasingly, we're trying to approach understanding of the brain by looking at many of these different forms of data, from genes to behavior and everything in between. The Ludmer Center was established 3 or 4 years ago with the help of the Ludmer Foundation. And its mission was to integrate all of that information using big data analytic approaches. The Ludmer Center was the engine for our Healthy Brains for Healthy Lives initiative from CFREF. And it's about $100 million from CFREF to study different aspects of brain structure, function, physiology. What's important about that has already been stated, but this emphasizes that point. Healthy Brains for Healthy Lives was one component of at least 3 interrelated CFREF awards, which place Canada in a very powerful position when approaching the new generation of brain research. So we have the linkages between Healthy Brains for Healthy Lives and BrainScan. We're joined at the hip. CFREF told us so. The fact that we are already closely interacting with BrainScan just made that an easier integration. Many of the people from at Western are also trained here at the MNI, including Adrian. So it's a very easy relationship. But as John mentioned, we also have a very close interaction with Ivado at the University of Montreal, looking at big data, artificial intelligence. We have a number of deep learning initiatives underway, which allow us to integrate what's going on at the University of Montreal with what's going on at McGill, to allow us to conduct big data analytics in the brain. The goals of Hubble, as I call it, HBHL, Healthy Brains for Healthy Lives, are megalomaniac. I have to apologize, but you don't get $100 million for incremental science. So within 10 years, transform many brain disorders from terminal or lifelong afflictions to treatable or even curable conditions, reduce the human socioeconomic burden of psychiatric and neurological illnesses, and improve the mental health, quality of life, and productivity of people around the world. And as you'll see with some of the comments from Pedro Valdez Sosa later on in the meeting, this global outreach component of our mission is extremely important to us. More specifically, the goals are to understand the individual brain, integrate all those various forms of information into one gestalt understanding of brain states. To do that, you need advanced computational resources, and I'll talk mostly about the platform for the analytic analysis of big data. Major emphasis on clinical translation and commercialization of basic research, and in due course, we have to produce a Canadian framework for brain health to influence the policy of healthcare in Canada. The layout of Hubble is 4 main themes in neuroinformatics and 3 application domains in neurodegenerative diseases, cognitive neuroscience, brain plasticity, and population neuroscience and brain health. This cartoon summarizes the basic principle that we're looking at any individual as a dot in a high-dimensional hyperspace, incorporating information from behavior, genetics, and various brain imaging phenotypes. This will allow us to either study cohort trajectories, red line, and departures therefrom, green line, and that might be disease, it might be development, it might be brain plasticity. Or we can look at prediction to understand how individuals may be moving away from the normative trajectory during the course of some change in brain state. Another way to look at this issue, this is from Alain Daga, is to emphasize that when one normally considers genes and brain state, whether it's a disease or a cognitive level, the relationship between genes and brain state is confounded by pleiotropy. Different genes, aberrations in those genes manifesting themselves in multiple different disorders. The problem is that we need to consider the problem from the perspective of intermediate brain mechanisms. So it's much easier to identify a gene or gene cluster associated with a specific mechanism. Any brain disorder can then be seen, if you like, as a weighted sum of various aberrant circuitries. So the important point here is it's all in the circuitry. So that's enough of the general philosophy. What have we got in place to allow us to analyze these kinds of data, collect and analyze all of this data? I will talk briefly about CBrain and Loris, two platforms that we built here at McGill. CBrain is a portal to Canada's high-performance computing infrastructure, and indeed more increasingly, its linkages to a portal to the cloud-based services, not just Big Iron. About 200,000 processors across the country. Basically, users can be here and they get access to either data resources, storage resources, or compute resources, Big Iron or cloud, through the CBrain portal. Data can be anywhere in Canada, computing can be anywhere, resources and users can be anywhere. I won't go through all of the features except to note that the CBrain is a multi-point environment, so the data does not have to be transferred to any central repository. It can reside anywhere across the country, as can the compute resources. And CBrain essentially manages the access of you, the neuroscience user, towards these compute and data storage resources. At this point, about 600 users across the world are using the CBrain platform. We have approximately 29 countries involved. About 199 of these, 200 of these users are international. The Loris platform is a database. It's a multimodal database that stores originally imaging, behavior, and genetics, and more latterly epigenetics and tissue samples to allow us to capture all of this information for any individual subject. And as many of you will know, combining data across different scientific domains is easier said than done if they all reside in different databases and different organizing principles. So that's one of the primary benefit of something like Loris, is it can store all of the above for any given subject. Loris is a threefold platform. It allows us to capture and supervise data acquisition across multiple sites across the country. It allows us to do the usual functions of a repository upload and download of the various forms of data that we can collect. And it's a front end to the various analytic pipelines, be they on the CBrain or any other workflow engine. These underpin the Tannenbaum Open Science Initiative that has been established at the MNI to make all of the data that's collected at the MNI publicly available. And Loris is used in various projects across the world. There are something like 400 behavioral instruments embedded in Loris straight out of the box, and we have tools and instrument builders which allow us to develop new behavioral instruments that can be added to Loris. About 25 to 30 IT professionals behind the platforms that I've just described, and many different papers that you're welcome to peruse at your leisure and find out much more detail than I've just skated over. I think it's important to note that these two platforms are supported by a cyber infrastructure challenge grant from CFI, and amongst other things, it provides software support across the country. In our Maytag repairmen, if you will, established in Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, and Calgary to support users getting their workflows up on the CBrain platform. And Compute Canada have promised us 8 to 10 petabytes as part of their commitment to the support of this CFI cyber infrastructure. The cyber infrastructure component underpins this recently launched Canadian Neuroscience Platform, CONP, which we launched just last Monday with representatives from people all across the country. This is funded by Brain Canada. And the CONP has many different components in terms of cyber infrastructure, research, national training programs, international outreach and partnership, clinical translation, and open publishing. Again, you can go to this website to find out more about CONP, its aims and its deliverables. At the moment, we have some 33 partners involved in CONP, and this is not a club. Any other institutions which are not already part of this are more than welcome to join up. Just to close, just a few examples of national and international initiatives that are using these platforms. The Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration in Aging, headed by Professor Howard Churko, is a national Canadian initiative to look at various subtypes of dementia. Mayada Alsabag is primary on the National Autism Informatics Platform, which involves Sid Skalowitz and James Desjardins from Brock, as well as people from these other universities. Sid and James are bringing EEG Lab to the party in this particular initiative. I thought I would incorporate this. This is hot off the press. Jean Gottman and his colleagues have just published the MNI Normal Intracerebral EEG Atlas, which shows normal EEG in 1,785 channels from over 100 patients. And this is an example of open science for intracerebral EEG mapping. And lastly, I can't give one of these introductions without making mention of Pedro Valdez Sosa in the audience. Pedro, as many of you will know, is based half of his time in Havana in Cuba and half of his time in Chengdu in China. And they have collected massive amounts of EEG data screening information across the entire population. And one of the things that we plan to do is make at least some of this data available through the CBrain platform. As I said, Pedro spends half of his time in Chengdu in China, and with various colleagues, some of them who are expats from Canadian labs, I'm now setting up a China, Canada, Cuba axis, which will be making use of CBrain across across China, and building links to us in Canada and in Cuba. Each of these three countries brings different strengths to this partnership, and I think this is a major motivation for Pedro being here for this last month, to build up this infrastructure across the three countries and to make the CCC Axis a global example of data sharing, international data sharing. It has seed funding from 3 funding agencies in Quebec, China, and Cuba. Not a whole lot of money at this point. Most of this money is going towards travel between the various participating sites. But of course, we propose to build up on top of this platform much larger programs on specific questions, whether it's dementia or neurodevelopmental disorders. And of course, to close, this is what really happens when we get seed funding. These blackmail photographs are of Pedro and Maria Luisa looking at the big brain when they were visiting here. And this is Maris Lasson from FQRNT, Yasser Ereturia, Antoinette Bobesch. This, for those of you who don't know, is the better-looking twin of the Valdez Sosa identical twins. You can spot the difference. One of them has a Father Christmas stick-on beard. This one is, they call themselves manic depressive. He has the depressive job of being the institutional director and paper pusher, and he has all the fun doing the science and having good food. So, oops, sorry. With that said, I think I just made introductory remarks on the platform underpinnings of what we're trying to build here. And I think I'll pass it over now to Robert to move us on to the scientific part of this program. Thank you.